Okay, guys, part five of the Jefferson Republic um, lecture series right here. Okay, I left off just a minute ago with or depending on when you're listening to this, Jefferson, remember, holds onto his Embargo Act of 1807, and he also known as the Grab Me Act, waiting for somebody to find if they know that one. Email me if you know the answer by that way, or you can tell me in class, one or two. Okay, but by March 1st, 1809, remember this, the Embargo Act's really hurting the Americans, so Congress repeals the Embargo Act and it replaces it with the Non-Intercourse Act, which basically reopens trade with all countries except France and England. So you can ship it to anybody else, but you can't send anything to France or England. Now, it's important, and I'm going to go through all of these and I'll kind of reverse and come back. There's a key way, you got to remember these because people always get the Embargo Act, Non-Enforce Act, and then the next part of this series of acts that gets set. Some people mix them up. So I have an interesting way for you to try to remember this, so I won't cover that right now, but I will come back to it. And I got to remember to start my clock because I forgot to start my clock. Okay, so basically, so why does this embargo fail? And it definitely does fail. Well, first, it kind of overestimated the European dependence on American goods. Jefferson and the Congress, remember they're banking on that Europe's going to really, really depend on U.S. food, and it's going to so desire that they'll come back on their hands and knees begging for us to reopen our ports and begin to ship across. One of the things that they'd forget, kind of to overlook, besides overestimating the dependence on it, Latin America actually opens their ports up and makes a fortune selling in replacing what the United States wasn't sending. And not only that, remember, Napoleon is the king of the land, so he controls most of Europe. So whatever he needed, he just stole. So he didn't feel the pinch at all. And basically, the other part is that the Americans actually see this more on a warfare on them than it actually was hurting Europe, and they wouldn't support it. So those are the key reasons that this Embargo Act failed, which you should be able to explain to an essay. Now, unfortunately for Jefferson, the Embargo Act kind of makes him a very unpopular president. Um, so he retires after his second term, keeping in line with Washington and Adams being only a two-term president. Remember, they retire. They're not voted out. They're not. It's not because they didn't run. I mean, they lost the election or anything like that. They basically do retire. So James Madison in 1809 becomes the next president. He's also a Democratic Republican. Now, when he comes into president in 1809, and the very next year in 1810, the Non-Intercourse Act expires. So Congress passes, and it wasn't very effective. I mean, it did free up some of the ports and free up some of the exporting, but you still had to deal with France. You still had to deal the problem with France and the problem with England. So Non-Intercourse Act relieves it some, doesn't relieve it all of it, but it does expire in 1810. And Congress ends up passing the bill called Macon's Bill Number 2, named after the founder of the bill, which basically trades with the world, trade with the world. Basically says the United States can trade with the world, trade with either France or England, depending on which one of them repealed their restrictions first. So whoever repeals the restrictions, that's who the United States will trade with. Now, Napoleon jumps all over this. He repealed France's holding, and basically his hope is that it's going to force the USA to help him in blockading England. Now, um, Napoleon banks on the fact that, or at least properly banks on the fact that England would not, it would be stubborn enough that it would not repeal its orders of council. Madison, on the other hand, is actually, and Congress is hoping that England would repeal the orders, and that by France doing this, it'd be like, wow, okay, now we're kind of forced to do it too. But they don't, and France's gamble is correct that England does not repeal its order of council. So Madison basically is forced to place the embargo back onto England because they didn't comply, they didn't repeal the restrictions, and according to Bacon's Bill Number 2, they can only trade with the countries that repeal the restrictions that they placed on. So he has to put that back onto England. But basically, what Madison does by doing this, he ends up picking a side, and so U.S. cannot basically claim neutrality because of the fact that now they really have picked a side. You know, now you can make the argument that, well, they didn't technically pick the side. England kind of forced their hand, but that doesn't matter in the interpretation of international laws and international policy. Basically, by putting the embargo back on England, the U.S. has picked a side to some degree. Now, let me go real back before I get on to Tecumseh and the Prophet. I told you I want you to how to remember these. Okay, you have these three. First, you have the Embargo Act. Okay, and this isn't the reason the Grab Me Act is known as this, but this is a good way to remember it. Okay, don't be grabbing me. Okay, don't be grabbing me. There's no intercourse, and now every student every year ends up writing the Non-Intercourse Act. Basically stated that you could not have intercourse. Okay, that is not what that means in any way, shape, and form. I know that sounds like it, but it's not. So, but the catch is this: oh, grab me, no intercourse or non-intercourse, and then it comes Makin's bill number 2. You got to pay the bill. Okay, so you have oh, grab me, no intercourse, and then Bacon's Bill number 2. Try to remember those guys because you have to know them in those orders. People always mix up Non-Intercourse Act with Bacon's number 2 more so than they do the Grab Me Act or the Embargo Act. So try to remember that because that's really important for you to know. And I'm trying to look and check one more time. Okay, so moving on. So we have the Tecumseh and the Prophet. Okay, Congress, has new makeup in 1811. You have your older party or party men that existed in the party, that old establishment that had been there for quite some time, or get replaced. They get replaced those with younger men that basically become known or referred to as the War Hawks. And basically, this group comes from the South and the West, and the War Hawks are basically tired of being bullied by England. Remember, with the impressments, the very concepts, the Council Orders of Council. So basically the Warhawks look at England as such. The spoiled great syndrome. Remember, we talked about this in class. We beat you in the American Revolution, but you didn't release your forts and everything else. You stayed around. You're constantly supplying the Indians with weapons. You're constantly creating problems for us in our new country. We won. You lost. Get over it. And basically the Warhawks look at this as England is not going to stop doing this. They're going to constantly keep going back. They're going to constantly, every time they get a chance, they're going to impress sailors just because of the fact that they think they can. So they look at England as being a bully, and it's time for America to stand up and make a stand. England, to a large degree, plays a major part in this because of the fact that they do keep supplying Native Americans, and the Indians begin to threaten the settlers in the West. Remember, I told you that Louisiana Territory was going to become really big because people are going to try to start moving west, and there's a lot of Native Americans there. You have two Shawnee brothers. One is Tecumseh, and the other one is the Prophet. I cannot say his Native American name. I wish I could, but I can't. And they basically form a confederacy for all tribes east of the Mississippi River. They're trying to like the Iroquois Confederacy that existed. This is the last attempt to actually confederize the Native American groups into collectively so they can defeat these new settlers, these Americans, or former British. But William Harrison in 1811 was the governor of the Indian Territory. He marches an army into the west, into the Indian Territories, and at the Battle of Tippecanoe, they're hoping they're going to catch Tecumseh there, but he's not there. He's actually had left already. The Prophet attacks Harrison, but unfortunately the Indians are destroyed in this war. And Harrison actually becomes a major war hero. And later on, when he runs for president, it's going to be, Harrison, Tippecanoe 2, I think is his campaign slogan. Tecumseh actually forms an alliance with England. Because remember, he's the one that escapes and doesn't get caught. And he ends up fighting on their side on the War of 1812. So it was kind of the last-ditch effort of the Native Americans collectively in a confederacy to finally destroy or stop this expansion. It doesn't work. The settlers are going to flood in, and spoiler alert, they kind of get wiped out to a large degree. So, Mr. Madison's war. Okay, Madison came to believe the war with England was inevitable, much like Adams did with France. But Madison has even a more reason to believe this is going to happen. And the British, like I said, are arming the Indians. The Warhawks are whooping for war. Um, the the Southern Warhawks from the South are wanting Florida. They feel like that should be part of the United States. And America just, finally just had to stand up for itself. He just could not sit there and just constantly let England, kick it like a dog and ignore it and not even acknowledge that it's really its own country and that it is a power to be dealt with, or that it has sovereignty, or any of those concepts which England's kind of really just kind of ignored. So Congress declares war in June of 1812. The House is a really close vote. It's 79 to 49. The Senate is fairly close as well, 19 to 13. And without doubt, it's majorly the South and West that wants war. New England does not want war. Now, New England is member pro-business. They have most of the industry. They have a lot of shipping that they do with England. So they definitely don't want this war to take place. Now, New England actually becomes very treasonous during the War of 1812. And again, this is not an act of where they don't commit the treason. They basically do. And there was a lot of argument that they could have been charged, the individuals could have been charged for treason during the war. If the country had been older, then we might have actually done that. But because the young country is so young, at the end of the War of 1812, they don't bring up charges against anyone on treason because it kind of works out in our favor in the long run. But they do support Britain. They don't support France. They don't want Algerian Canada. They feel like if we were, and there was a talk during the War of 1812 of us taking Canada, and a lot of people say, well, we should have done that. That was something we kind of messed up on. We should have took Canada when we had the chance. But the New Englanders definitely don't want it because they feel it's just going to add more Democratic Republicans, and have them more control, and they'll lose their power. And this is a federalist. New England's a federalist area, a large federalist area. So they're trying to hang on to that power. Again, maybe that sour grapes syndrome that's existing here. They do lend money to England. Remember, this is a war. This isn't a conflict. I think this actually becomes a war. So they lend money to England during the midst of a war. They send food to Canada for British troops, and then New England also states that their militias can only serve in their states. They cannot go and serve in the American Army collectively. They can only serve in New England militia at all. The biggest problem was that America was in no way ready for this war at all. Yeah, Madison knows that this is going to inevitably happen. Yes, the Warhawks want the war. They're clamoring for the war. They're saying it must be a war. It has to be a war. We can't take this laying down anymore. But the reality is that America at the time is not ready for a war, and that's going to bring an end to this video lecture series. And we'll see you in the next one. We'll talk about the War of 1812.